Hi everyone, this is Jena Griffiths of Earth School. I have with me today Ray Clements, author of Zor. Welcome, Ray.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for joining us. And you've written a fantastic book. In fact, some people are calling it an instruction manual to improve your life.
Well, you're very kind.
And I thoroughly enjoyed it and got so much out of it. And people have been writing to me ever since I wrote a post about it, saying how they've really also got a lot out of your book. So, well done. What inspired you to write it?
You know, it's really strange because I am not a writer at all. This is my first novel, although I am working on a subsequent one currently. But I've always had a fascination in spirituality, philosophy, and science. But it's always been a layman's type of fascination where I would just read a lot of books. I took a lot of courses. I studied it in college. And I thought the three main principles were separated. You know, I really thought that philosophy stood on its own and spirituality stood on its own and science stood on its own. In fact, it always occurred to me that any one of those disproved the other two. And then believe it or not, about 5 years ago, I woke up in the middle of the night and I had an epiphany where I just jumped out of bed and I started writing notes madly. And it just occurred to me that where philosophy, spirituality, and science are leading is all on the exact same path. And that instead of being separated, these are all interconnected. And you know what Carl Jung was saying in philosophy is the exact same thing that there's quantum physics is telling you, is the exact same thing that Christianity and Judeo-Christianity, and it was just mind-boggling to me that somehow a wall that had separated these three disciplines dissipated and they all merged together. So for like an hour, I'm just writing notes, and really the next day when I looked at it, it was gibberish. No one would have understood a thing I wrote except me. And I kind of forgot about it, and I just laid it on my bureau, and I went about my life. And then almost 2 weeks to the day, the exact same thing happened, where I woke up in the middle of the night, and I realized I had just experienced a lucid dream. And as I'm sure you're aware, a lucid dream is when you have a dream, but you realize you're dreaming while you're in the dream. Mm-hmm. And I had experienced a lucid dream, and what I saw was the exact opening scene of my book, Zor. And I saw the exact closing scene of my book, Zor. And then I realized that all of the things I had written 2 or 3 weeks earlier was the middle part of the book. And I remember my wife waking up, and she was like panic-struck. She thought I was having a heart attack. And she said, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And I looked and I said, "You're not going to believe this, but I think I'm going to write a book." And, of course, she rolled her eyes and went back to bed. But over the next
midlife crisis or something.
Exactly. But over the next 12 months, I put this together, and it just flowed beautifully from from those 2 moments of total transparency in the middle of the night.
It's incredible that you wrote the middle part before the beginning.
It's really strange, yeah. There was just all of the philosophy and the theories and the thoughts that just coalesced at that moment. Just seemed to make all the sense in the world to me.
You know, it's incredible. I don't know if you've ever read Stephen King's book on writing.
I got to tell you, I am a big fan of Stephen King. Obviously, everyone is, but
Okay, one moment. I just want to see.
I am getting some feedback. Yes.
Mute somebody. Hang on. Okay, I've got full control again of the panel, so I'm just muting the other people.
But what did he say in his book?
He said that it's like an archaeological dig that you get the story's already there, and you just have to gently. First of all, you have to just write it down. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like given. You know, you just have to get it onto the page, and then after that, you chisel away and shape it. But you don't.
That is my experience. I will tell you one thing about the craft of writing, and I certainly wouldn't consider myself a writer of any magnitude. But the one thing I did realize putting this book together is whenever I tried to control the storyline, I failed miserably. And when I let the book just write itself, I couldn't keep up.
I get goosebumps.
But it's true, and there are so many times, I have an agent, obviously, and a publicist, and there are so many times they would give me ideas or thoughts that would make the book, quote unquote, more marketable, and I would try to work that into the book, and I just failed. But when I let the story take care of itself, like I say, it was just amazing how fast it came together.
It just wrote itself. That's amazing. It's a very, very readable book. It's excellent.
Yes, kind of you to say. I think, it was funny because I worked with a couple editors after my first draft was done, and they made a lot of suggestions on how to give it a little more gravitas. And I looked at them and said, what I did was I really wanted to keep all the stuff out of a book that I normally skip over. And I wanted to just give it the facts and the meat. And I wasn't that interested in a lot of the fluff that a lot of people put into books. And that's kind of why I think I've had a lot of people tell me how readable it is and how easy it is to get through. Because it's more of a primer than it is a final edition on a lot of these areas. And I could go into a lot more detail, for instance, on quantum physics or spirituality or philosophy. But I really just wanted to give everyone kind of a taste to see how it goes. And hopefully they'll take this book and fly with it and go to a lot of different areas and find out a lot of different information.
And hopefully you'll write a sequel.
Well, I am working on one, believe it or not, and it's coming along pretty well.
Great. You'll just have to let it write itself again.
Exactly.
So I sometimes want to call you Zor instead of Ray. So let's just go there first.
Okay.
How come you didn't use your own name?
Well, when I finished the book,
you've given it away. I mean, I'm using it because you have used it in various places. I mean, I see you used JB, which obviously is the guy, the main character.
Protagonist, right, Jonathan Brewster.
Mm.
When I originally started to market the book and its idea to publishers, the big question they always had was, who are you? And I would try to come back to it. It doesn't matter who I am. It matters what the book is. And they would explain to me that the publishing industry has changed, that really now no one cares as much about the story as they do about the author. And a couple of them even told me, they go into a bookstore, you'll realize, and you won't recognize the books, but you recognize every picture on the front cover of the books because they're all celebrities. They're all either famous or infamous, and people are much more interested in the background and the credentials of the writer than they are in the story initially. And I didn't want that to happen with this book, so I figured I would write it under a pseudonym. I didn't want people to be concerned about who I am or where I come from or what my background is. I didn't really think anyone would read the book, and as you say, I wrote it under the initial JB, which was certainly a tip of the cap to Jonathan Brewster, the protagonist. I wasn't sure anyone would read that and think this was a true autobiography, but I thought it might leave a little bit enough of a question that people would say, I wonder if this individual really did experience this or if it's just fiction, but let's read it and not be that concerned with if there are any letters after the writer's name like PhD or DDR or whatever, and let's just see what he had to say. So that was my thought. I will tell you, I've grown to regret that a little bit. As you say, with the newer editions, I have put my name on the cover because I do find that people are following more now. Obviously, I'm online a lot, and I've been on the radio a lot, and people would prefer knowing who the individual is.
Yeah. And I must say, it did also raise the question in my mind, is this semi-autobiographical?
Well, that's a great question. I've been asked that many times, and I would have to say that every single character in the book is a part of me. That I wasn't just writing it from the perspective of a fiction author. I wrote it from the perspective of living that part.
Okay. Just this is completely out of all the questions that I wanted to ask. I didn't even want to ask it, but I suddenly, what is this with the tap in the nose twice? You have
again. That's a total organic part of the book that just came, where it kind of combines all the characters at some point or other.
Yeah.
Where they're kind of on the inside of the joke and not the outside. And it was something that grew with Jonathan Brewster and his dad and he doesn't really know how his uncle or how Zor picked it up too, but they both picked up the mannerism, and it kind of ties everything together. One thing I've always tried to tell people is that I do not consider myself an artist by any stretch of the imagination, but I do look at the book itself as perhaps a work of art in the fact that everyone who reads it interprets it a different way. And I've really enjoyed that. I mean, I've gotten thousands of emails and texts and tweets and what have you where people have talked about the book, and everyone sees it differently. And this is one of the things, it's funny that you asked that question. That's one of the questions that always seem to come up. And whenever I turn that back to, well, what do you think it means? The response I get is just amazing.
Okay. I thought maybe you were having a dig at someone at your own father.
No, not at all.
Who did that? So what's the most bizarre answer people give you?
A lot of people think it's a reference to a movie here in the States, The Sting, which I don't know if you ever saw that, but that was that was the number one movie, I think probably in the mid-'70s, number one movie of the year.
Right.
And that was a gesture that everyone made after they had committed a quote-unquote scam or a heist. They always rubbed their nose twice as a signal that the heist had been completed.
Okay. So, Ray, moving on to refusing negative energy, towards the beginning of the book, you have Zor meeting those guys in the street.
Right.
And he, they are being quite aggressive, and he just keeps sort of saying, no, thank you, and the protagonist, John, is amazed that he doesn't get beaten up.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to explain that a bit?
Well, it's funny because that is the scene that I had dreamt 2 weeks after writing all the notes. That is the lucid scene that I had dreamt, that I was there in the dream witnessing this, knowing that I was dreaming.
Oh, wow.
And that's kind of what inspired me to write the book. And the whole issue is...
I get goosebumps, but anyway.
But it's the acceptance of recognizing, diffusing, or accepting negative energy. Now, to take it back, I'll bring it to my personal life a little bit, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Personally, the protagonist in the book is a middle-aged money manager, and I was a stockbroker for a number of years. And back in the 80s, I was a very successful stockbroker. And, with the multiple houses and the multiple racehorses and fast cars, and I was really living the life that we all lived in the 80s when we were part of that 1% before it became a nefarious identification.
Mm-hmm.
And then making some very bad personal and professional choices, I lost it all. And, in a matter of years, I found myself divorced, bankrupt, unemployed, and living in the attic of my parents' house in a small farm in New Hampshire.
Wow.
And my folks were very concerned. My family was very concerned. My friends were very concerned. Yet I still maintained a level of happiness that people couldn't understand. They thought I was just putting on a fake front, but I really wasn't. And people would always ask me, how can you be so happy? How can you be so satisfied? Everything that you aspire to, everything that you went to get, you've lost. And I didn't really know the answer to that. And I said, geez, you got a good point. I should be miserable, but I'm not. And so I really went on a quest back in the late 80s to find out, where happiness comes from. What is happiness about? And there was an individual at Harvard University, Dan Gilbert, who did an amazing study one time. And he said, everyone always quantifies happiness and unhappiness in terms of money and health and wealth. They think, if I have a lot of money, I'll be happy. And if I ever lose my health, I'll be unhappy. So what he did was he actually did a study, and I talk about this a little bit in the book, where he actually did a study where he followed a group of people that had recently won the lottery, and he followed a group of people that had recently survived an automobile accident and were now paraplegic. So both groups suffered tremendous trauma that would affect their happiness. And what he found is exactly what you would expect. He found immediately after winning the lottery, everyone was euphoric. And for the group that immediately after had the car accident, they're incredibly depressed and down. But interestingly, following both groups, in the course of about a year, he discovered that they both moved to the same level of happiness they were at before the traumatic experience. So the question he asked and answered is happiness an internal emotion, or is it determined by external experiences? And he came to the conclusion that everyone has their own level of happiness, regardless of what they experience on the outside. Now, obviously, there's tremendous levels of immediate trauma that can be very happy, very sad, but over time, we seem to all go to our same level of happiness.
So is this where the happiness is an inside job came from?
Yeah, I think it might be. And the reality is, after reading that study, it really got me to think about my own life. And I realized, I've always had an innate ability. I don't know if I was born that way or if I acquired it very young, of managing my emotional response to reality. Now, you talk, and I talked a little bit about this in the book also, is a lot of people say, and I haven't been one of them, that you can control reality. Now, a lot of people get turned off with that statement because they don't really understand what we're saying. I'm not saying you can look at a coffee cup and turn it into an elephant. Yeah. You can't do that. But what you can do, and what you must do, is you can control your emotional response to reality. And once you learn how to control your emotional response to reality, you then are controlling reality. You can choose whether to be happy or sad. You can choose whether to be excited or dull. You can choose everything you want to do given the same level of experience as anyone else.
Yes, I think the classic example of that was Viktor Frankl in the concentration camp. Where he chose he chose to actually feel sorry for the people who were victimizing them. Mm-hmm. And he chose to feel free. That he was able to choose his feelings and his emotions.
That's exactly true. And the important thing is, either people get this or they don't get it. And the people that don't get it, you can't convince that you can do this. But if you keep an open mind, and if you really do pursue this, and I hope my book Zor gives a little insight to that, of how your neuron network works in your brain and how your emotional response is really what controls everything we do, and how 90% of the time we're living in a subconscious state, that if we don't start controlling our subconscious state and rewiring our neuron network, we're just in a lot of trouble. But as soon as we realize that we can control our subconscious mind, and we can, and as soon as we realize that we can have a different perspective on life, and we can, then all of a sudden we recognize all the negative energy that seems to come at us. And in the scene of the book that you're talking about, it's a classic scene of a Haitian dwarf, and that's the name. His name is Zor. And he's walking through the Boston Common, and a couple of 16-year-old kids who are probably skipping school and smoking cigarettes on a park bench start to make some derogatory comments, and he just walks by without giving them any notice. And they get so angry that he hasn't responded to their negativity that they chase him down. And they stand in front of him, they start yelling more and more and getting more angry, and he just keeps simply saying, "No, thank you." And they don't understand what he's doing. And he's just looking at him, shaking his head, smiling, saying, "No, thank you." And after 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes of this, they're exhausted. They've given him every insult they can think of. They've prodded him in every direction they can think of. He's given them no response. They just walk away. And as he explains it to Jonathan Brewster, who happened to watch this entire scene, is that these two boys, although they looked like the aggressors, they were actually victims. They were victims of negative energy. They had taken the gift of negative energy from someone else. It might have been their parents, it might have been a schoolmate, it might have been a stranger, but someone had caused them to be angry. And that negative energy was so insidious, was feeding on them like a flesh-eating monster. They had to get rid of it. They were dying to give it to Zor, that Haitian dwarf, anger him, and then that would have relieved their burden. But instead, Zor refused their gift of anger. They were forced to maintain it, and they just walked away.
I like that you talk about that later in the book, about it being a parasite. So it's almost like a separate entity, and that it feeds on you, but you have to allow it to do so.
Yeah, exactly, and it's one of these things. And again, we talk in the book a little bit. And just so anyone hasn't read the book is a novel. It's a story. It's certainly not any type of preaching or any type of how-to-do book. It's just a story that touches on these topics. And as I say, I hope it touches them to a level deep enough that inspires people to read other books about them, because there's so much information out there that's just fascinating stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as negative energy itself, I really do believe that. I do believe that it exists. It is there. Now, we talk about quantum physics in the book, and with quantum physics you talk about 10, 11, 12 different dimensions of reality. And I do think that energy, whether it's positive or negative, exists perhaps in a different dimension.
That's what I wanted to touch with you, because you almost implying that it's coming from a different dimension. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think there's little doubt about that. And again, we talk about where our energy comes from, and we talk about, I touch a little bit on the law of attraction. I think the law of attraction has a lot of merit. I think it's a very interesting theory. What bothers me is that everyone has pretty much coerced it into thinking in terms of materialism. That if we concentrate on getting a Porsche, we'll get a Porsche. Or if we concentrate on winning a lot of money, we'll win a lot of money. And that's not what it's about. The law of attraction really talks, again, about our energy and our emotional response to our existence, and the wavelengths that are being emitted and received, and how we're looking for similar wavelengths. And if we are emoting positive energy, we are then receiving positive energy. And if we're emoting negative energy, we are going to receive negative energy. Now, obviously, we all know that it's much more fun to hang out with people that are happy than are sad.
Yeah.
So we can see it on that level. That that makes sense. If someone's a real positive person, a real happy person, they're going to have other positive and happy people around them. If people are sad and morose and gloomy, they're going to attract sad, morose, gloomy people. So we can see it on an anecdotal level, but it's even much greater than that. When in fact it is the energy, and I'll say it, I think it's the life force that we all experience from a different dimension. Some people call it God, some people call it the collective unconscious, some people call it, in quantum physics, they call it entanglement. I just refer to it as energy.
Yeah, so I like that, what you were saying about entanglement, about everything that was created at the same moment in time, so the Big Bang.
Well, now you get me excited, because this is where it really starts to blow your mind. I talk a little bit about spirituality, I talk about philosophy, and we kind of all understand that. Quantum physics is something that, for the life of me, I don't understand. It still seems to be held in a dark closet. It's been around for 60, 70, 80 years. They were talking about quantum physics in the 1940s and 50s. And one of the theories of quantum physics, and it's more than a theory, it's been proven, why it cannot be proven in an actual experiment, it's been proven mathematically thousands of times, is that all energy that is created at the same time is always bonded, regardless of the distance between the energy. Now, in quantum physics, we're talking about incredibly, incredibly, incredibly small mass, subatomic particles. And what they'll do is they'll take a look at subatomic particles that could be a galaxy away. And if they were created at the same time, when you affect one particle, the other particle immediately is affected, faster than the speed of light. So there is no way that the effect on the particle here can be transmitted to the effect of the particle on the other side of the galaxy. It just has to be occurring there.
Unless space doesn't actually exist.
Exactly. It's really, and again, if you go to my website, which is www.gotozor.com, there are a lot of links that will send you to other areas on the internet that will talk about quantum physics. And it's one of these things where you always, if you really start reading this stuff and really start digesting it, you feel like you've fallen into the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
You really do. You're looking at things saying, this is unbelievable. I never thought about this. And it's not some kook saying this. These are some of the greatest minds of the world. There are some very significant questions that science cannot answer. Huge questions. And the only logical answer at this point is that other dimensions exist that are, in fact, impacting our dimension. And if that's the case, then to bring in spirituality, is that where God exists? You know, if we're talking about these post-death experiences people have of where they say, you know, I went somewhere, I saw something, but then I came back. Well, where did they go? Did they go to a different dimension? Was it their energy that transmitted them to that dimension? And if it did, was it the energy that came back? And is it the energy that is the life force? And are our bodies and all living things just the receptacles of the same life force? But depending on the DNA of these bodies and the vibration that we're giving off, we bring in different forms of the same source. And if that's true, then we are all connected to the same source. And if we are all connected to the same source, and I am experiencing negative energy, that impacts everyone worldwide. And if I'm experiencing positive energy, that impacts everyone worldwide. So it's not just your obligation to be harnessing and recognizing and accepting positive energy for yourself, but it's for all mankind.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what there's someone, some European thinker, but you know Richard Moss. I don't know if you know Richard Moss. He's also an author, written quite a few spiritual books. And the Mandala of Being, for example, he says, well, he's paraphrasing someone else who says, the greatest thing you can do for humanity is to learn to manage your own emotions.
That's beautiful. That's
Which
tremendous.
is exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, it's funny because since writing this book, as I say, it was published in Taiwan. In fact, it was the #1 book there for about 6 weeks.
Wow, it's great.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of surprising. It got to Taiwan the same way I think it got to Switzerland. I don't know how, but it just showed up there. I got a call from someone. A publisher gave me a call. They read it. They wanted to sell it, wanted to publish it. We put that together. From that, it's been published in mainland China. In fact, it just came out 2 weeks ago. I don't have any idea how it's doing there. But it's traveled all over the world. It's been read all over the world. And I can't tell you how many people have contacted me, just like you did, and say, I read another book that was so much like this. I read another book. There's an author that, and I was amazed at how many stories and how many scientific or spiritual or philosophical books have been written right along the same lines as Zor.
Yeah, yeah. So, Ray, just going back to this idea of multi-dimensions and the idea that perhaps there are several or multiple dimensions all at the same time, and that you shift from one to the other according to your vibration. So if you could, I was thinking if your emotions were almost like a buoyancy jacket. You know when you dive, when you're a diver, and you have a buoyancy jacket, which controls whether you go up or down.
Buoyancy.
So you could, when you've got a low vibration or you've dropped energy, you drop down to the denser levels. And if you can change through gratitude or whatever, you change your emotion, you make different choices of your emotion. You can then put air into your BC, into your buoyancy jacket.
Exactly. That's exactly true. The problem being is that so much of our life and so much of what we do is held in the subconscious, that on a conscious level we have a very hard time controlling ourselves. And that's kind of what I tried to get in the book a little bit with the relationship between Jonathan Brewster and his wife. They were very much in love, but they had kind of fallen out of love because they kind of let their subconscious take over their relationship. Now, it's not their fault, it's not your fault, it's not my fault. I mean, since the beginning of prehistoric man, we have been hardwired to be fearful and timid and frightened. I mean, if you take a look at the cavemen when they existed on this earth, it was a very violent time. And, when the cavemen were walking down a path to their cave, and there are two Neanderthals side by side, and all of a sudden 100 yards off in a pasture, they see this beautiful apple tree loaded with apples. Well, the one Neanderthal who was very positive and very excited and very aggressive and has a devil-take-care attitude says, oh, my God, there's some beautiful fruit there. I'm going to go get some. And he starts sprinting towards the tree. And then the other Neanderthal, the one that's timid and fearful and afraid, is thinking, oh, my God, I don't know, should we go over there? There's a big boulder next to that tree. There might be a saber-toothed tiger behind that. I think I'll stay right here on the beaten path and not take any chances. And sure enough, it was a very violent time, and the individual that ran to the apple tree get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. And what happens is all of the Neanderthals and Cro-Magnons that were very timid and they didn't take a lot of chances and were very worried about the negative outcomes of their experiences are the ones that procreated. So we have been hardwired since the beginning of time not to think this way. We have been hardwired since the beginning of time to be always considered the negatives of every situation. And then on top of that, we have been taught, unfortunately, by society, whether it's by our school system or by our parents or by our peers, to concentrate on the negatives in life in order to avoid them. And I see this all the time with my own children. And, I think I'm a positive individual. I think I give them a lot of positive support, but I give them a lot of negative support too. And, a lot of times when they do the right thing, I say nothing. It's when they do the wrong thing that they get admonished.
Yeah.
So what they learn as they grow is, I want to avoid doing the negative thing. So they're concentrating on the negative thing, which just brings more negativity. As we become older, as we grow, and we want to change our attitudes or we want to change what we do, you and I both know visualization is 90% of the game. I play a lot of golf. If I go to the golf range and I start driving the ball, I will hit it straight as an arrow 220 yards every single time. As soon as I get on the golf course and there's a big pond to the right and I'm teeing up, all I'm thinking is don't hit it to the right, don't hit it to the right, don't hit it to the right. You know what I do half the time? I hit it right in the middle of the pond because I'm visualizing the negative problem. And that's what we do throughout. We talked about that a bit in the book. If you recall when they were talking about happiness and they were trying to figure out what brings happiness, and they made a perfect T-square on a whiteboard in his office, and he listed all the things in life that make you unhappy. Solitude, despair, poverty, illness. And then he tried to figure out what on the right side makes you happy. They had a very hard time because what we do in this society, what we do in the world, unfortunately, is we concentrate on all of the things that make us unhappy, and we think if we can just remove that from my life, I'll be happy. If I can just get a better job, I'll be happy. If I can just lose weight, I'll be happy. If I can just get a bigger house, I'll be happy. And all of these things we eventually accomplish, and that's, again, unfortunately, I think what a lot of people talk about when they talk about a midlife crisis. All of these things you eventually accomplish, and then you realize you're no happier than you were.
Or you do it the other way. If I be happy, and then all the other things happen.
That's exactly right. If you wake up tomorrow morning and say, I've got to lose weight, I'm not going to eat, I'm not going to eat, I'm not going to eat. By noontime, you've already had a slice of pumpkin pie because all you're doing is thinking about not eating. But if you wake up in the morning and say, today I am just going to be happy, I am going to eat and drink anything I want, you'd be amazed at how little you eat and drink. We are fixating on the wrong things. We talk about positive energy and negative energy. What you sing about, you bring about. Instead of fixating on removing the negative in life, we should be fixating on adding the positive.
Well said. So do you think that with all those dimensions there are multiple Rays? One is having a bad, one is living in a dark place at the same time as there being a positive ray?
Well, do you remember the example in the book when they're talking about playing ping pong on a train?
Yeah.
Okay. So what you've got is you've got a flatbed train driving down a train track and two people playing ping pong on the train. And when one person serves to the other person, that ball moves about 2 meters a second. However, the train itself is moving 100 kilometers an hour, which is about 28 meters a second. So if you're sitting on the train and you're watching that ping pong ball go back and forth, the ball is moving 2 meters a second. If you're on the ground at the train station when the train goes by, the ball is moving 2 meters, but the train is also moving 28 meters, so you're seeing the ball move 30 meters a second. Now take that one step further. If someone is sitting on Mars or on the moon and watching that same ping pong ball travel, they're seeing it move 2 meters a second on the table, 28 meters a second on the train, and the revolution of the Earth is 465 meters a second, for a total of 495 meters. So depending on your perspective, that ball either moved 2 meters, 30 meters, or close to 500 meters. Now, if you're incredibly small and you're sitting on that ball, it didn't move at all. So when you ask, are there more rays out there than just me? Depending on your level of perception or on your area where you're perceiving from, there's a ray at every level. There's a distance at every level. When you talk about that ping pong ball moves every single distance imaginable, including none whatsoever. So I would have to say, yeah, I would say that from everything I see, the probability of, I know this blows people's mind, I don't want to get too deep, but the probability of infinite reality is more likely than not.
And then and the way to navigate that is with your emotions, like with your buoyancy jacket. So you either going down to one reality or you shifting. So perhaps some people are in a reality where Romney got in. But those of us that had enough lightness in spirit managed to get into the level where...
But I will tell you, it's interesting because in the book, in your neck of the woods, you're talking about the Halderan atom smasher, which is the single largest piece of equipment in the world. And where, if anyone listening, I'm sure they know, an atom smasher is when you take two atoms and you put them in a tube and you have them go around a circle in opposite directions as fast as they can and then smash them and see what happens.
Yeah, that's sort of under the ground near Geneva, huh?
Exactly. And it costs $10 billion to make, and they just have it up and running. And what they're going to find out is you have an infinite amount of energy in each atom. If they smash and collide, and then you measure the energy again, if any of that energy is lost, where did it go? It would have to go into a different dimension. And if that happens, we have actually proven that there is a dimension out there that we have no cognitive understanding of. That X number of energy smashing to X number of energy creates X minus Y energy. Where did that Y energy go? There's no place for it to go unless it's flipped into a different dimension.
So going back to your negative energy, you're imagining that, or you think that that's coming from another dimension.
I think what happens is negative energy exists and positive energy exists, but they can only exist if they find a life form to infiltrate.
It sounds a little bit like David Icke.
In what way?
He's got these reptilian creatures from another dimension that are feeding off human misery.
The reptile men that are living underground?
Yeah, well, they're an interdimensional beings.
Right.
It's sort of like his conspiracy theory with, it's all with the Illuminati and everything. But it's also it's these interdimensional beings that are feeding off humans, and that's why we all get subjected to wars and things like that to create all the negative energy. So that it's like we're about
Right. I'm not sure there are actual beings in a reptilian form that are feeding off of it, but you could use that as a metaphor, and I would certainly agree with the metaphor that there is a negative energy. My expectation is the negative energy that we experience is something that we can't recognize with our five senses because it comes from a dimension that we know nothing about, but that it does exist, and that it is floating out there in existence that comes. And once it settles into the host body, it just multiplies. And we've seen that many times where individuals that are negative just attract more negativity and get worse and worse and worse, and they act more abhorrently and abhorrently and abhorrently. There's a part in the book where they talk about another book that was written by Jen Phillips, the Dahmer brothers. And it talks about a lot of these really violent criminals that are in penitentiaries, how they start practicing meditation, Dhamma meditation, Vipassana meditation. That isn't just transcendental meditation that Transcendental meditation, again, is a meditation where you just kind of let your emotions seep out of your pores and just let everything go. But when you practice Vipassana meditation, that is when you really get to the root of where your negative energy is coming from and deal with it and let it go. And a lot of these men that are in this penitentiary that have created some of the most heinous crimes around have become so incredibly peaceful because they finally got to their root of their negative energy and it dissolved. And the people that own the penitentiary, running the penitentiary, the guards, everyone out there were stunned at the success rate that this program had.
Have you heard of that Ho'oponopono, where there was a guy who cured a whole criminal ward like that just by working on himself? The people, the prisoners didn't do anything. He took each case and he read the file, and then he looked to see how that reflected on him. And he worked on that part of himself, saying, I love you, I'm sorry, and whatever, and healed that within him, and the person healed.
Well, that's a phenomenal concept, and it kind of works into what we're saying, is that if everything, and again, we're trying to discuss this in a 3-4-dimensional world. If you believe the fourth dimension is Einstein's time-space, and we're trying to look at it this way, we're trying to say, well, here's an energy force coming from someone else, and if it's at a certain vibration, and if he, without even talking to the individual, can come up with the opposite vibration, will that negate both out into a level playing field, into a level signal? That's a great concept. I haven't done enough studying on that. I've read about it. I've seen it, and it's very interesting. That there is a theory out there that you have negative energy fighting positive energy in the world, and as soon as you can have enough positive energy to outweigh the negative energy will disappear. You won't even have to address the negative energy. You'll just have no place to go.
But wouldn't it be like light shining on an object? There's shadow, and the shadow serves the light to show the form of an object.
It could be, but again, we got to remember that light is just a wave also. Sounds are a wave, energy is a wave, light's a wave. I mean, when you take a prism, obviously you're bending the light waves. I mean, if you have two light waves approaching an object that are absolutely counter to each other, they negate each other out, then what do you have?
You have nothing.
Exactly. Now, my thought and my expectation in talking in Zohar, and again, we're talking a little deeper, I think, than the book Zohar is. I mean, Zohar,
I know.
Zohar is hopefully it's interesting and easy to read, but I'm fascinated by the subject, and I'm hoping that people will read this book and move on to this subject.
Yes.
But in Zohar, it's more talking about recognizing the sources of negative energy all around you and just refusing to take them. And once you refuse the negativity that you might hear on TV, that you might see in a traffic jam, that your parents or your children or your peers or total strangers might give to you. But once you recognize that you're being bombarded with it all the time, just say, no, thank you, I'm not going to take it. Once you stop taking in negativity, you stop giving off negativity. And so the people around you are not subjected to your negative emotions, and it just exponentially grows into a harmonious experience, which is tremendous. And it can happen so quickly, and once it happens to you, it happens to your family, then it happens to your neighborhood, then it happens to your country, then it happens to the world. And I'm telling you, it can happen that easily.
It's fantastic.
It really is. Unfortunately, what we tend to do in life is we get so caught up in politics and sports and mortgages and responsibilities and this. We don't spend enough time thinking about what we want to accomplish and what we can do. And we're getting very close to managing this. I mean, we really are. I mean, I am incredibly optimistic about where this is going. And especially since I've written the book and I've had such good feedback, and I found there are so many other authors with similar thoughts, that it's just a matter of time before we get over the edge and we start realizing that it's not about competition, it's about cooperation. And that's really where we got to go. And once we get there, it's just beautiful.
I like what you say about diffusing You've got to cognitively diffuse the negative energy. Rather than pass it on to someone else, you've actually got to diffuse it.
That's true. And what you've got to do is you've got to recognize, and that's the issue that we talk about from the subconscious to the conscious. 90% of the time, as I said earlier, we're controlled by our subconscious. I mean, that's why when you're driving home from work, you can drive for an hour, get into your driveway, and not remember to drive at all. Your subconscious drove you home. Your conscious mind was somewhere else. I mean, people call it daydreaming, but it's more than that. Your conscious mind is either thinking about past things that have happened, or it's concentrating on future things that might happen, or it's recognizing your immediate environment. And that's what your conscious mind does 90% of the time. And when it's doing that, you're being controlled by your subconscious. And your subconscious is always just taking you through the path that you've always traveled before. That's why you may read a book and get to the bottom of the page and you didn't remember a word you've read. It's not that you didn't read the words, it's that you read them in your subconscious. A lot of times, your subconscious is what's taking in the negative energy. You're too busy doing this, thinking about that, doing. You don't even realize that you're accepting the negative energy. And I'll tell you how you can tell, because usually to deal with the negative emotional experience you associate with negative energy, you're doing an abhorrent behavior. Maybe you're eating, maybe you're drinking, maybe you're smoking, maybe you're abusing drugs, maybe you're verbally abusive to someone else. But when you have let that negative energy come into your body, to deal with it, you're usually doing a negative activity. So when you walk in, when you don't even realize you're walking into the kitchen to make a big bowl of ice cream, and halfway through you think, what am I doing? You know, I'm trying to lose weight, I'm eating ice cream, what am I doing? And you realize, and when you think about it, oh yeah, I had a thought about my folks, I haven't called my mom, I haven't talked to her in 2 weeks, I felt guilty, so I went for a bowl of ice cream. Or, you know, all of a sudden, you know, it's 5 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon, you're pouring yourself a martini, and going, wait a minute, I don't want to drink. Why am I doing this? And you think, oh, yeah, I was just thinking about my job. I have a big important meeting tomorrow that I haven't really prepared for. It's going to be a nightmare. Next thing I know, I'm drinking a martini. So a lot of times you'll have these negative energies will come into you, and they'll cause you to do a negative behavior, and that negative behavior will trigger you to realize, oh, yeah, now I know what I'm thinking. What you've got to do is be cognizant enough to recognize the negative energy when it comes. When you suddenly feel bad, when you're walking towards the refrigerator, when you're walking to the bar, when you're going down to get that pack of cigarettes, when you're doing that behavior that you don't want to do, but is your emotional salve for the negative thought, when you start doing that behavior, that's when you got to snap out of it and say, wait, why am I doing this? Now, if I want to have a cigarette, I'll have a cigarette. If I want to have a drink, I'll have a drink. But if I'm smoking and drinking as the response to negative emotion, that's not good. I have to realize where that negative emotion came from and deal with that directly. One of the phrases in the book that keeps coming out is deal, don't dwell. And that's exactly true. If you have a negative feeling, deal with that feeling. And as soon as you do, you diffuse that negativity, and all of the repercussions go the way of the buffalo.
We actually work with that with fingerprints, funnily enough. But that's for another topic. But I'd like to discuss that with you, but I don't want to bring it in now because we're talking about your book. But it's a way of managing your emotions, you know, because you can see what drags you under.
Exactly. As I say in the book, and I tell you, the most important sentence in the entire book is when Zora looks at Jonathan and says, listen, the cause of obesity is not what you eat. The cause of obesity is what's eating you.
Wow.
And that's exactly true. And that's it in a nutshell. And
Brilliant.
Unfortunately, we get so caught up in the symptoms, and we try to cure our symptoms. You know, we're thinking, you know, I'm gaining weight, I want to lose weight, or I'm smoking too much, I want to quit, or I'm drinking too much, or I'm abusing drugs, I want to stop that. No, those are just the symptoms of the problem. The problem is the negative energy that we've allowed to creep into our psyche. And if we can deal with that negative energy, everything else just goes away. I mean, think about it. I don't know if you smoke or drink. The first time anyone smokes it, they practically cough up a lung. Everyone hates smoking. The first time you have a drink, it's the most vile stuff you ever tasted. No one likes the experience, but we do it as a counter action towards the negative emotional feeling that we're getting. And if we can just recognize that, and if we can just attack that negativity and just not let it come into our psyche, just say no, as Zora does, just say no thank you. I understand that you're loaded with negative energy, and I'm sorry you accepted it from someone else, but I'm not going to accept it from you. I wish you nothing but success in your life, but you're not going to make me angry. And as soon as you do that, that is so powerful.
And if countries could do that to each other.
Well, you know what? As I say, if we start, and I say in the cover of my book, you and I can change the world today. And we absolutely can. If we practice this, it will go from us to our family, to our neighborhood, to our town, to our state, to our country, to the world. It absolutely will, and it will happen so fast. Unfortunately, most of us live with our subconscious mind in control, and you just can't beat your subconscious because you're not aware of what's going on. That's why so many of us have such a hard time changing abhorrent behavior. And people will look at you, and you might look at a woman who's in a bad relationship and say, "Why do you do this every time? You're in such a bad relationship." And she looks at, "I know I'm not going to do it again," and she really means it. But the problem is, on a conscious level, she means it, but her conscious only controls her life about 5 to 8% of the time. Her subconscious controls her life all the other time. And on a subconscious level, you have to affect the neuron network that I talk about in the book a little bit. You have to rewire that so that it takes care of yourself when you're not thinking of it consciously.
So you give some good examples. You give some good advice with regard to marriage. Would you like to just share some of that?
Well, it's
actually really
interesting you say
advice.
that. I'm glad you say that. At the beginning of the book, one of the things that brings Zor into Jonathan's world is that Jonathan is spending a lot of time at a bar. Now, he's not doing it for any other reason than just to unwind. But what Zor realizes very quickly is that you're not looking so much to unwind as you are looking to avoid a problem you have at home. And Jonathan isn't aware that he has a problem at home. He lives with his wife. He loves his wife loves him, but they've just separated. And they've just started to live different lives. And the issue, again, is the subconscious retooling of the neuron network. And what I mean by that is when you first start out in a relationship, everything is great. Everything is so much fun. Everything is so exciting. And that is how your impression of that other person is formed. Because when you first start out in a relationship, it is all great. You're going out to parties. You're going out to dinners. You're going out to movies. You're dating. And the very essence of dating means that you're having a pleasant experience. And when you have that pleasant experience, that is how your mind always associates that pleasant emotion with that person. So, as I say for an example in the book, if you go for an early date and you go with your date to a Bruce Springsteen concert, regardless of what that date is like, you're always going to associate that person to all of the positive enjoyment you had at that concert. Well, what happens as we are in a relationship longer and longer, there are some negative associations that we make with that person. And we don't have as much positive experience with that person as we do negative experience. And one of the things that we all do, which is incredibly sad but true, is we use our spouse or our mate or our lover as a sounding board for our negativity. And we'll come home from a bad day at work, or we'll have a bad day at home with the children, or we'll have a bad experience with in-laws or so forth, and that will be what we want to share with our spouse. Because by sharing it with our spouse, we have unburdened ourselves, but we burned them.
We've dumped the energy.
Exactly. We've dumped all the negative, and we feel great. You know, regardless of who's at home and who's working, the person that's working comes home, sits down for dinner, says, "Oh, let me tell you my day. It was brutal, yada, yada, yada." And then they get up from the table and they walk to the living room, and the person that's sitting at the table now is all worried about their spouse's day. And it's notoriously bad, but we still do it, and we don't realize we're doing it. Whereas if you make a commitment, again, a cognitive commitment to yourself, that all I'm going to do is share the positive experience of the day with my wife, or all I'm going to do is share the positive experience of the day with my husband, then your wife and husband, your spouse, will be so excited about seeing you walk through that door over time because they have been given nothing but positive feedback for every time they spend with you. The problem is when you walk through that door, your spouse is just used to you doing nothing but pouring all of your problems. And if it's a traditional marriage with the husband working and the wife at home, the husband is telling the wife how bad his day was from work. The wife is telling the husband how bad her day was at home, and they're both miserable after the dinner, and neither one wants to spend any time together. One goes to one room, one goes to the other.
So
the other thing that I think was kind of important in the book hello?
Yeah, carry on. Yeah.
Oh, the only other thing I wanted to say when it talks about relationships, and this is something, again, that it gets lost in marriage so quickly, is the bedroom. And by the bedroom, we don't mean the sexuality of the bedroom. By the bedroom, we mean the communication in the bedroom. That is the one place where husbands and wives communicate more than any other place. But what happens, unfortunately, is it becomes the area of either acceptance or denial on the sexual terms, and everyone thinks of it in that way. And in the book, it talks about how Jonathan and his wife Mary go to bed at different times now. And the reason being is that Jonathan doesn't want to go to bed at the same time with Mary and be rebuked, and Mary doesn't want to go to bed at the same time as John and be hassled. And so the point is that they've decided just to go their separate ways, and one goes to bed at 9, one goes to bed at 11, as opposed to just spending time with each other, forgetting the sexuality, but just understanding the intimacy of lying in bed together and having a conversation.
Yeah, and I like your advice there of admiring something in the other person, something new each day.
Well, that is incredibly empowering, and I do that, and with my wife, and it's unbelievable what it's like when someone you care about, and it's a very simple technique. When you go to bed, you simply tell your spouse one thing that you admire or love about them, and you can't repeat it. So, the first day you say, I love the fact that you care about me, or I love the fact you're a good person. It's very easy 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 days down the road, but after 2 weeks, coming up with a new emotional reason it's very hard. You got to really think.
It makes you creative again.
It does. It makes you creative, but it makes you. Unfortunately, in a lot of relationships, again, it's our negative subconscious. We identify the negativity of our marriage, but never the positive aspect of it, because we expect the marriage to be positive. It's when it's negative that we dislike it. So what this exercise does, is it makes you really think, all right, what do I love about my wife? What do I love that happened today? What do I really appreciate? And it really makes you think about all the things that are great about the marriage, as opposed to being so concerned with what's negative.
Which are often tiny little things, but they're actually really important.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. The problem is, again, it's like when you raise your children, and when your children act properly, you expect that. When they act problematically, that's when they get your attention and you yell at them.
Unfortunately.
Same thing with a marriage. I mean, again, we all concentrate on the negative energy of life just too much.
Yeah. I have a question for you, Ray, from Brent.
Great.
An American in Switzerland. Brent says, great call, and he's in the banking industry. So he wants to know, in the banking industry, attacks come as soon as you're delayed. Then people mob you with the perception that you're incompetent, and that's an easy way to get hooked. When you find you're already on the defensive, it's such an automatic process and stays as you replay the fear of impacting or hurting others, as your mind brings you down trying to find a mental solution. What techniques have you found to get out of it in the middle, when you're in the middle of an argument?
What's interesting is he just gave a great synopsis of how the negative energy you accept at the very beginning just grows, and the actions and the reactions. And the only way it can work, again, much like Zor in walking through the park in Boston, is the very first inkling of negative energy, whether it's from a customer, whether it's from your boss, whether it's from anyone else. You just look and say, no, thank you. You just need that resolve. No matter what they say, no matter how they act, you just have to. Now, again, I'm not too sure you want to smirk at your boss and say no thank you when he's mad at you, or if he's mad at you, but your mind just says, no thank you, I'm not going to take this negativity. I'm just not going to.
You just think it, you don't say it.
Well, it's funny because my wife and I, we say it and we kind of laugh about it when we do because you don't realize you're giving negative energy. Someone will say, no, thank you. And I'll say, oh, gee, she's right. I can't believe I just did that. And it's kind of funny. But that's because we're on the inside of a joke. I'm not too sure you'd want to do that to someone who doesn't get it, because what happens is that the person who has the negativity, again, with the questioner, if it's someone he's working with or if it's one of the customers in the bank, if they have it, as you refuse to accept it, it just compounds their anger. They'll get angrier and angrier. So if you're putting your hand up to their face in a stop sign and say, no, thank you, shaking your head, that certainly is going to exploit that anger. But if you just don't take the anger, and I know it sounds difficult and I know it sounds impossible, but if you just try it, you will be amazed at how easy it is. And if you do have a negative emotional experience, that means you've taken the anger.
But if you don't take the anger, okay, and the person gets angrier and angrier and angrier, and you're not taking it, and you're very calm, and you're just standing there, what's to stop them from bopping you on the head?
Well,
or pulling a gun out, shooting you?
Well, that's a good question. I haven't seen that happen yet. I suppose that could happen. I mean, I suppose it could be violent. What usually happens, what's always happened in my case, and what's always happened with everyone that's ever talked to me about using this technique, is that the person, once they realize they cannot transfer their anger onto you, they immediately go to transfer it to someone else because they have to get rid of that negative energy. It's just killing them. They got to get rid of it. And if they're trying to draw you into a fight, they're trying to draw out your emotions, as soon as you react, they have accomplished what they wanted, and they've given you their negative energy. Just don't react. I know it sounds crazy until you actually practice it, and then it's just amazing how free it makes you feel, how excited it makes you feel at life. When you realize,
exciting.
I'm only going to take in positive energy. You wake up in the morning, you can't wait to go outside because all you're going to do is feel better as the day goes on.
It's fantastic. I was thinking if we had to visualize this negative energy as like a worm that you're wearing around your neck or whatever, and you see somebody coming along with it.
It would be fabulous if and you know what, in another dimension, that may be exactly what it's like. We may all have an aura about us, and we might all be able to see whether it's blue or red, and blue would be calmness and happiness, and red would be negative energy, and it would be fun if we could see it and just avoid the red people and stay around with the blue people.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, once you really start, once you live in the moment and really stay cognitively aware of what's going on, you will recognize so fast how much negativity is out there. And again, it might be talk radio, it might be a TV show you're watching, it might be it might be a lot of comedy. There are a lot of things out there that we kind of laugh at nervously or that we take as entertainment. I mean, I will tell you, there's a tremendous amount of negativity in competitive sports. It's unbelievable when you really start looking at it, and how angry people get because you get emotionally attached to your team, or how disappointed you get. And it's just crazy that we allow that to affect our emotional well-being. But we do.
We do. We absolutely do. So, Ray, another thing you say is to change the world, just be yourself.
Once you've gotten to the point, and again, this is what I was talking about with positive, once you get to the point where you can recognize negative energy and you don't accept it anymore, then all you got to do is just be yourself. Just accept yourself for who you are. And this is a lot of what my second book is about, actually, when it's talking about society and what have you. You can only be who you are. The problem is we concentrate on the negative things about our life, thinking if I can change that, I'll be so much better. But once you disperse the negative feelings and you don't have them anymore, it's unbelievable how happy you are. And now that positive energy is being emitted to other people. And now you walk around and maybe you're not fixating on a big nose, or maybe you're not fixating on losing weight, or maybe you're not fixating on your socio-economical situation. Maybe you're saying, I'm really happy, I'm a good person, this is great, and that's what other people will feed off of. And it will just, it does take over, it really does. We've all seen it. You've all seen people. I mean, I've seen very wealthy people who are miserable people. I have no interest in being there. I have seen very poor people who are the happiest people in the world. I love being around. So wealth isn't the answer. I've seen it. I've seen tall, short, fat, skinny, every dimension out there where some people are happy and some people aren't, and the happy people are the ones I choose to be with. And as I'm getting older, which unfortunately I am, I recognize more and more that I don't have a lot of time to waste with unhappy people. I just don't. If they're going to accept the negative energy and try to pass it on to me, they're people that I don't really want to hang with.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been great talking to you, Ray. I see I've had you for...
Don't tell me the hour's gone by.
Yeah.
Oh, my God, that was fast.
But, I mean, I can keep you longer if you want to talk to me. But I'm really looking forward to your sequel.
Well, I hope so. It should be out. Let's see. We'll probably talk about the summer of next year. And the working title right now is Zor 2, You Can Only Be Who You Are. Okay, yeah, because I find that a very interesting concept, Just change the world by being yourself. Exactly. And again, I mean, some people get it, some people don't get it. I hope more people get it on a daily basis. But the reality is, if you are a positive source of energy for everyone else, it doesn't just affect you, your house, your town, it affects the world. And it affects it almost immediately, much like that whole quantum entanglement we talked about. Yes. Actually, it's nice to think of that in terms of quantum entanglement, because I was thinking of it in terms of, if you take the level of a swimming pool, say, and if one person's vibration rises, then the whole level rises. Exactly, yeah. An incoming tide raises all boats, no question. Yeah, but if you think of it in terms of entanglement, and that we're all touching everyone else at every moment. Yeah. Exactly, and we talked in the book a little about the chaos theory, and where it talks about, the beating of a butterfly's wing may start a storm on the other side of the world. Now, every butterfly doesn't do that, but anyone can. By the same token, every person has a positive attitude or positive energy might not change the world, but anyone could. You never know which one will be the successful one. It might as well be you. That's a great thought. Ray, I just wanted to say something about, we were in the place of entanglement earlier, and I don't know if you ever read that book by Umberto Eco about the various date lines and the wars between the nations when they were, they couldn't figure out how to calculate longitude. They could figure out latitude from the stars, but they couldn't figure out longitude. And there weren't any exact clocks. So they were all spying each country was spying on the other country's ships to see who had figured out how to calculate longitude. And what some of the people, and they did all sorts of really crazy things, and what some of the people did was, they would have a dog that they would wound with a knife, and then they would take the dog on the boat, and then at exactly 12 noon in Europe, they would plunge that knife into the fire, and then the dog theoretically would whimper on the ship. Which is interesting that thought was there like 200 or 300 years before the concept of entanglement came into existence. You're absolutely right. I mean, the reality is, as I talk about in the book, a lot of this quantum physics might have been around a lot earlier, except for Newtonian physics, which was so based on reductionism and the scientific explanation of atoms and electrons and neutrons, and how everything was like a little planet with little particles orbiting around. And we just found now with quantum mechanics and quantum physics, that's just not true. I mean, that's very true in the macro world, but the micro world and the mega world, it just doesn't exist. Yeah. Well, Ray, it's been wonderful talking to you, and as I said before, we're really looking forward to your sequel. Well, that's great. If anything else comes up and you want to talk, I hope you'll contact me again. I've enjoyed it immensely. Great. Thanks, Ray, and it's been really wonderful and very interesting talking to you.
So thanks
Thank
for
you
all
very
your
much.
tips. All the best.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
And thanks everyone for being with us. Bye. Okay, Ray, so I've actually switched off the recording, and I just wanted to thank you again.
Oh, you were tremendous. That was the fastest hour of my life.
Yeah, it's amazing. You blink. I had some trouble because for some reason every time I went to look at the questions, my computer would shut down. So,
No kidding. I'm sorry to hear that. That must have been kind of difficult to deal with.
but it doesn't really matter because the recording was complete, and so I'll get that up for other people. That some people only listen to the replay.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll also get you a copy of it if you want it.
That would mean a lot to me. I'd really appreciate that. Yeah, if you could just attach that to an email or something.
Yeah. And if people have other questions or whatever, I might contact you again.
Yeah, please do. That was very enjoyable. I'd love to talk to you again, either on or off the air.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Ray.
Jena,
And,
thank you.
All the best.
All right, same to you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
The moderator has left the conference.